You're now watching B2B Vault, the Biz To Biz Podcast, hosted by Alan Kopelman, powered by Nationwide Payment Systems, the #1 solution for payment processing.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to B2B Vault, the Biz To Biz Podcast. And today, this is a special occasion. This is going to be episode 401. So the tables are being turned on me today. And somebody that I know for probably at least a decade or more, James Huber, one of the founders of the global legal law firm and host of his own podcast, the Payments Expert Podcast, is going to interview me today. And we're going to talk all about podcasting, payments, and everything. Welcome to the show, James.
Well, welcome, Alan. Thank you. It's an honor. I was bragging to the team today that I get to be the host today. Alan, I think you said it. You've been on my podcast about 7 times. And when he's on it, I never get a word in. It's the Alan Show. So today, for the 400th episode of the B2B Vault, I am turning the tables and I get to ask the questions. And for once, Alan has to answer them. So, Alan, before we talk about 400 episodes, I know this, but I don't know how many people do. Before this, you were a chef. So walk me through the moment that you decided to leave the kitchen and head into credit card processing. What were people saying? How did that all happen?
Well, people said there's no way that's going to work. And it was an interesting time in my life. I was divorced. And I was trying to figure out what to do. Life after the restaurant business. Was I going to move? My kids were small. And I ended up going to interview at a bunch of credit card processors. We won't name any of them. And turned out one guy said they would hire me and train me. So I went to work there. And the interesting thing was I already knew some about merchant services. And I kind of knew everything I hated about the credit card processors I used at my restaurant. And I was like, I don't want people to have to experience like what I was going through. And that was part of the reason for working for them for about a year and then leaving and starting Nationwide Payment Systems, because I wanted to have a company that would treat people fairly as we could be allowed to. And then, and that comes down to having the right partners, right? And
Right.
you know more about that. Reading contracts that you have to make sure that you're dealing with people that are going to be as honorable as you are.
I love it. So you started Nationwide Payment Systems in 2001 with David Burney. What did the payments industry look like in 2001 as opposed to in 2025? I mean, in 2001, you're still replacing knuckle busters,
I
right?
mean, yeah, you're walking into businesses that have no credit card machines. It was great. It was a wild industry, in those days. You walk in, oh, you don't have a credit card machine? No, I don't have a credit card machine. Want to get a credit card machine? You're just, selling. I mean, it's just walking down the street, just selling business after business after business. I want to say it's shooting ducks, but, you had to get creative as to what you were selling. But it was a lot of learning, because you'd walk in the beginning of time, we didn't have machines like this. Like, this is wireless, Wi-Fi. No. We had machines. You're hooking things up to a phone line, the fax line. You have to put in the call waiting code. You'd press all these buttons on the machines to get them to download, which took 15, 20 minutes. And
Right.
so, it was a lot of, the business has changed. And let me tell you, every time there was a change in the equipment side of hardware, I mean, we would have piles of terminals to go to the recycling plant. I mean, you can't even imagine. I mean, you just can't imagine, like, how many times like the encryption changed for the pin pads from master section to duck putt to this one. Then the change to EMV. I think when EMV hit, I mean, we had some company come over here. I mean, my office had 55-gallon garbage cans everywhere full of terminals.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I've heard people when they are going in and they're going into businesses that are, don't even take credit cards. They know what credit cards are around this time. They're going in and charging these merchants, 10%. Because what do they know any better? And you're having to reconcile, paper receipts and stuff like that. And probably, a lot of places you've got so much stuff to do, you're not looking at your bottom line. But they were feasting for a time. But then those people, like everything in the, 2008, 9 period when leasing was huge, all of a sudden, those businesses, they're buying Ferraris, Lamborghinis, but that all washed out. I mean, what have you seen wash out, as opposed to just, going in and selling pricing or going in and selling leasing, what else is washed out? That because you've
Oh,
weathered the storm, you're still here. I know a lot of people that are not still here.
I've said it on your podcast before today. If you're not selling software, you're dead.
Yeah,
So, the whole thing is this, like we went through everything. So when we first started, we would lease terminals to people. But one of the things that was funny was, when I was working for the company before I had my own company, they were like, it's 48-month lease, 49.99. I didn't know any better. And then when we started our own company, I asked the lease, we got hooked up with a leasing company. You probably know Rosie Machado. She used to be at a leasing company, Integrated, back in those days, and I got introduced to her through the bank we were working with at the time. I'm still friends with people from that bank relationship, and they have helped me over 25 years. And what was interesting, we said, well, how else can we do this leasing thing? People said they don't want a 4-year lease; they have a 3-year lease on their store. And then they were like, well, you could do a 3-year lease, a 2-year lease. You could even do a 1-year lease. And I was like, we started doing a 1-year lease. And the reason we did the 1-year lease, the thing that I hated about leasing was all of a sudden at the end of the year, the merchants would get this tax bill from the leasing company. They
right.
had to pay this like excise tax, right? With some crazy thing. I didn't know, I was getting yelled at by people. So I'm like, no, let's just go sell. We're going to do this $99 lease or $89 lease, 13 payments, you're done. There's no taxes, no funny games, no canceling, no sending in the cancellation letter, and then you're stuck in the lease for another year. I can't tell you. I remember going in places and I would ask people like, okay, did you pay for these terminals or are they on a lease? And I remember looking at one guy's bank statement one time and they were paying like 8 terminal leases.
Right. For a
I was
one
like,
point of sale.
right. They had like one terminal in there, but they leased 8 terminals over a period of time. And I was like, you got to call these leasing companies up and we'd get them all the phone numbers and they'd call up and get all these machines sent back. It was a crazy time. And then, you know, you had Merchant Warehouse. They were one of the first disruptors in our business and they started selling terminals on eBay.
Yeah.
And then, all of a sudden now you can't lease. Now you got to sell people terminals. And I learned tricks about that too. Somebody said, oh, well, you can buy a whole bunch of terminals from like the leasing company
Right.
for like $30 a piece. And then we'd give them to a
Give them away.
terminal place. They would repair them all, put them back together, put them in a nice box, and they looked brand new. Right. And then we'd go sell those to people for a couple $100.
Yeah.
And then the next disruptor came in our business was United Bank Card, Jared's company, free terminals all of
Yeah.
a sudden. And back in the day we had a forum, because there was no Facebook. There was like a forum on this website called Green Sheet, and everybody was arguing free terminals versus leasing. It was calling each other names. It was the wild west of like what's going on. And still today, I'll run into merchants and I'm like, what are you? They sign a lease for like $99 for like a Clover flex and they're paying like $4,000. They're paying like $5,000 for a $900 piece of equipment. I mean, it just
Right.
doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. I mean, one of the reasons the leasing did so well is because it gave you the ability to pay your sales agents up front because you'd take that lease and you'd go sell it. You'd go factor that lease. But yeah, that's actually how I got my start in the business is I was doing collections on these leases. So we were suing people that had 8 VX20s in a drawer for $80,000, and settling them for, a few $1,000, sometimes more. But I was always looking at this and my joke was like, man, you could have had like 4 Miatas, but you're sitting on your VX20s. But okay, so speaking of disruptors, in 2021, mid-pandemic, you decided to start a podcast. Why did you do that? And be honest, was this a marketing plan or a hobby that has gotten wildly out of hand?
It started out as I wanted to have like a blog, but I couldn't figure out like really how to do a blog and how is people going to see this blog. And podcasting was like a new thing. Like, oh, you're going to put this podcast and Spotify and YouTube. And, I was looking into it and it was really expensive to do at the time. Cameras were like an insane amount of money. The software was like crazy. So I started out and I actually won a contest from this guy, AppSumo Company, Noah Kagan, and I thank him. It's his fault to have a podcast. And I won $800 worth of podcast gear. So I had
Nice.
my first camera, my first microphone, and I was able to get started podcasting. And they were horrible podcasts. And they were educational because the podcast had a different title. It was still B2B Vault, but it was the Payment Technology Podcast. And it was like a solo podcast. And sometimes I would have another person on there, but that was basically the whole gist of it. And then, and then I changed it later on. But it does, it helped. Like, believe it or not, like we've gotten many calls over the podcast. I've gotten calls from when I was a guest on your podcast,
Yep,
and
absolutely.
people will call me up and go, "Hey, I saw you on this podcast," or I was a guest on somebody else's podcast. I hear you talking about whatever it is, chargebacks, match list, B2B payments, and or something like that, and it became a lead source.
Well, I've got a question for you. You're at episode 400. Most business owner podcasts die on the vine. They go out and buy their or win their $800 equipment and they're dead before episode 20. What did you know, or did you know something, or what did you refuse to accept that got you past the point where everyone quits? Because you said it, the beginning ones were horrible. I actually remember them popping them up and not thinking that. But what got you past the point where everybody quits? How'd you push through other than you were sitting in your house brooding, locked in a? Oh no, you were in Florida. You guys weren't locked up.
Yeah, we weren't locked up. No, the thing is, like I had listened to a few people about, doing YouTube and being a podcaster. And one of the things is I wrote it down. I said, I have to commit that I'm going to do 100 episodes. No
Okay.
matter what, I don't care what anybody says, whatever the critiques are. And I did get help along the way because as I was, putting out more episodes, I would get people that had podcasts and they would reach out to me and they go, "Hey, your podcast is not that bad. You know, it's pretty
What a
good.
compliment. It's not that
It's
bad.
pretty good. Maybe you need a little better like audio, do this, do that, So, you have to, you learn from that. And I was grateful to get that kind of advice. And I've given that advice back when somebody calls me and they're starting a podcast. I have a discussion with them like, listen, you want to know all the mistakes I made? Today you don't have to make that kind of investment, to buy. two pieces of equipment for $1,000. For $1,000, you can make this whole studio what I have now,
Right.
because everything's gone down in price.
So if you went back to 2020, 2021, before you were an unbridled success, that you are now in October 2021, what would you tell that Alan that you know now, other than COVID's a hoax and the liberals made it up?
Actually, in 2021, it was really crazy because when COVID started, one of the things, I was really trying to pay attention, like, okay, what's going on? How are businesses reacting? And what are people doing like around me? And one of the things I noticed was a lot of the people that were in our business were just sitting around at home doing nothing.
Right.
And I was like, man, what is going on? Everybody's doing nothing. And I was like, you know what? And then you start to listen to like news programs. I remember I was listening to one program and they were like, oh, what are all these companies going to do that are getting checks in the mail? And I was like, it clicked on my head. And we already had this gateway that could accept credit cards and ACH with a payment portal and a link and everything. And really, nobody was really doing that at the time. I don't even know if Stripe even had something at that point. They might they probably did. And I was like, okay, let's start going through all the leads we've had, all the people we've talked to about this payment portal, and start calling them on the phone. And that's what I did. I sat down in my house. I started calling people on the phone, booking demos, and literally some of the people I would call up, they go, oh yeah, I remember you showed me that. We need that. We cannot be getting checks in our office. We need this right away. How do I sign up? And literally I booked about close to $20 million in monthly processing volume in literally 60 to 90 days.
That's amazing. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I've always loved this industry, is seeing people like you in this space. Is you just adapt. This industry has proven it's everything proof. Recession, payments does pretty well. Huge global pandemic, payments did pretty well. I mean, people that had a heavy restaurant, they went down, but then they figured it out. The smart ones just figured it out. Go to your restaurants and help them sell it online. So, um, but what was the difference what would you tell Alan in 2021 or James in 2026? What would you do differently on your podcast?
I don't know if I'd do anything different on the podcast. I think podcasting is, you know, I try to find good guests, interesting topics, because one thing when I first started my podcast and it was about credit card processing, quite a few people started copying, doing credit card processing podcasts.
Who are you talking about? I don't know who you're
Who
talking
we were who not well, you guys
about.
came out, but that's more of a legal. You guys were looking at it from a legal perspective, and I'm not a lawyer. Maybe we should have done a podcast together back then.
That was the answer I was looking for. You got there.
Yeah, that could have been it. It could have been the Alan and James podcast, and it would have been something crazy. But it was, it's like, I didn't want to have ISOs on my podcast because that's what I did. So,
Right.
I was like, okay, well, let's dig into like what do business owners want to know about? And that's what I started digging into and having on guests. I've been lucky. I've had Roger from Visa on my podcast 3 times talking about B2B payments. And we're not talking about like what it's going to do for the agents. We're talking about merchants. How's this
Yeah.
help a merchant, run their business, improve their cash flow, use their time better, make more money? Cash flow in businesses, it's the number one killer. Whenever I see a business going out of business or suffering, there's always a cash flow problem.
Of course.
And that's, it's a big thing. And, we try to have people come on and talk about, human resources, payroll, talk about hiring people. Should what kind of sales force should you build for your business? I mean, I've covered tons and tons of subject matter over over the last 3 years.
Yeah, 400 episodes talking to business owners and everything like that. Which conversations stand out going back to the vault uh, that affected you in a way that you actually changed how you ran your business based on a guess? And I don't want to hear about the most popular podcasts directing your viewers. I want to know what actually changed curmudgeonly Allen to go do things differently.
Well, I mean, if I had to go back and say something I should have done differently a long time ago, I don't think anybody could have predicted how software would be the ultimate driver in our business today, and how important it is. And I would have focused a lot more on software. As far as guests go, I had a discussion with a guy who built Salesforces, and it was a really great discussion. Me and him debated, should you hire 1099s? Should you hire, or should you put people on salary, or should you run more of a referral program? How are you going to get business in the door? And, after that, I just went I don't, we can't compete in the, agent market. I don't have enough money to put people on salaries. So that's what I did. I said, okay, I'm going to focus on this area of building a referral program. And that's been one of the big drivers of bringing in good quality clientele, of being referred versus you're out trying to cold call people.
Yeah, I love it. So what started out as a, marketing slash hobby actually was a business catalyst for yourself. So that's fun. So give me your Mount Rushmore, the current Mount Rushmore before they carve a new guy into it. Who are your four guests from 400 episode? Who's coming on it and why?
One, Roger from Visa, because that was really good. I mean, I don't know. Have you guys ever had Visa on your podcast?
He won't get near us. We did that panel with Visa
Yeah, that was a
where
great panel. That guy wanted to run for the hills.
yeah, yeah. So no, they're not coming on our podcast.
So, and I've tried to get other people from Visa, MasterCard, Amex on the podcast to no avail. So so I really appreciate that Roger has come on the podcast. He's great to talk to. Me and him know each other for a really long time because he worked for Amex back in the day, and he signed me up in my restaurant to accept American Express. And then we ran into each other at an SCAA, and I was friends with Sonny Wooten at the time, and so me and Roger always had a relationship. Other discussions I've had on my podcast, I've had you on the podcast before, and I've had Chris on the podcast. We can put you guys together.
All
And we had
right.
some great legal discussions, some involving things for merchants and some revolving around things for agents, and that's a great podcast. I had a guy, I had a guest on from the owner of the guy who started NAV.com, which is Credit Karma for businesses. And we had a really great podcast talking about how important personal credit is, business credit is, how important that is to running your business and things like that. And the discussion also, started getting into AI, and something we talked about on your podcast recently about how they're also getting hit with all these scammers trying
Yeah.
to get people credit cards and loans, and how like 70, that a high percentage of hits to their website, and it's just all scammers,
Yeah.
and that's, a big thing going on right now. And, those would be like top podcasts. I interviewed a guy from a VP from Benzinga. That was a really interesting conversation talking about how Benzinga was just basically a news platform, and now they changed into a data platform, and how they're supplying data for people who are trading stocks. And not only that, we got into a whole discussion about the prediction market, And that was really interesting too. And I've had guests come on and talk about, cryptocurrency, which is kind of crazy. But those would be like some of the top guests I've had. And I can tell you this, some great discussions about AI. One, that have been on the podcast, because I think AI is, there's good and there's bad, but I think, people really need to start figuring out what they can do with AI, what you can do with data in order to grow your business and help you run your business. And I
Is that
think,
is the AI bubble going to pop, do you think?
well, I think one thing popped with the AI bubble is that tokens, which were like all of a sudden, AI is cheaper, fire everybody, right?
Yeah.
And we see Meta and all these companies firing people left and right. Then all of a sudden, OpenAI and Claude come out and they go, whoa, 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 whoa. Sorry, everybody who's been using the agents for $100, $200 a month or free, sorry, you have to start paying for your tokens now and switch to the API. I had a friend of mine who literally cut his staff in half and was running like 15 AI agents. And then he found out from Claude that he was using 9 billion tokens a month. I go, so what does that mean? Because I don't know what that means, right? I have no idea. So I said, 9 billion tokens? What's 9 billion tokens mean? He goes, 9 billion tokens from Claude. He goes, that basically translated to $7,500 a day of tokens.
Oof.
And I've talked to other people who have like using some kind of software, and they're, having to hook, the software company says, oh, you got to hook up your own API. And they all of a sudden they run up a $20,000 bill on with AI tokens. So, the big thing now everybody's complaining about is all these data centers, and
Right.
data centers destroying the environment, and all this stuff. I don't know. Nobody's built a data center or tried to near my house, because if it's look anything I've seen on videos, I would be completely against that. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like they did it too quick. They needed to get us addicted to it a little bit more before they popped it on us because, then I've heard people are going, they're just going with the cheaper Chinese models of AI over these that probably aren't as good, but, do you need to drive your Ferrari to work? Now your Honda will get you there, but we're supposed to be talking about your podcast, so I put you back on the spot. Who said the most contrarian thing of one of your guests that you sit there and you go, okay, and then it ended up being right?
they end up being right.
Yeah.
People being wrong. I remember once I've had a couple guests on talk about crypto and how crypto is going to take over, and
Oh yeah.
and that just like I was like, there's just no way, unfortunately, crypto was kind of invented to be this anonymous, like digital cash, right? That's was the original thing. All of a sudden, people start getting all this crypto and spending millions and millions of dollars. Federal government came in and they went kibosh. And we saw there was no more evidence of that than when they had Bitcoin. I think they called it Bitcoin 2020 or something like that. The first that a huge, massive convention down in Miami. You couldn't believe it. The whole convention center, the whole place was full of vendors for a bit, every kind of crypto thing imaginable. Mortgage companies, this company, that company. They were paying people to put their money into their companies and give you 10% interest on
Yeah.
cash. I was like getting scared. I was like, 10% interest. That's like unheard of, right? I was, mining equipment. There, the convention center, it was the most insane convention I ever saw in my life. 2 years in a row. The third year, boom, the place wasn't even 1/3 full,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
tons of companies not showing up. The whole thing just imploded.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
it's still around. So
no, it's
you
still around. That just now, if you really start to look at what's going on with crypto, and one thing, another person that I told them, I said, you're 100% wrong, 100% wrong. I predicted this a couple of years ago. with a few people. I told them the government's talking about stablecoin. I would not be investing in these XRP and all this other stuff that they're talking about is going to be used for banking. It's never going to happen. They're going to have this digital $1. And this other stuff is going to go down the toilet. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah.
Uh, so recent episodes covered, synthetic merchant fraud, agentic, AI, stable coins, AI chargebacks. I always love how you talk about there's the two AIs fighting each other, cyber security. So how different are the questions that you ask guests in 2026 versus 2021?
Oh, wow. It's completely different. I mean, today
Yeah.
we're focusing more in on technology. Where every guest that comes on, I ask them about AI because they've got to be using AI or there's something going on. They're doing something with AI. And we have a podcast coming out. It's going to be out before this, prior to us this broadcasting, and it's all about agentic AI and how this guy's got a free tool and everybody's going to learn about that. It's crazy what's about to come. And even today, I saw Open AIs. You can open up ad accounts on there and run ads on Open AI.
Wow. Great. Has a guest ever told you something on the air that made you pause, a jaw drop, something that
Yeah.
you still, you came home and you told the fam that I can't believe what I heard today. We had to edit that one out.
I don't think anybody ever told me anything too crazy on the podcast, you know, that they didn't want to put out there. I've had guests on that said you can't ask about certain things, so I couldn't ask about that. The one guest I always want to have on the podcast, I keep asking strip club owners to come on the podcast. I cannot get a strip club owner to come on the podcast.
Why
I
not?
I don't know. They don't want to be on camera. And I'm like, I can have it where your camera's all no camera on you, and you don't have to be on camera. We don't even have to say your real name.
You could have like the face and the garbled, like the hard
Yeah,
line
we could change
2020.
their voice like they do on those shows when they're interviewing somebody who's a whistleblower, and they don't have to be on there. I think it'd be a great podcast to talk about what's going on in that business because that business has been turned upside down.
Yeah. So you've done 400 episodes, and I'm sure about 398 of them were unbridled success. What's the hardest episode that you've ever recorded? Technical, emotional, or I guess just being a total disaster?
I had one disaster episode where the episode was supposed to be about a certain subject, and the person came on the podcast knowing that's what I wanted to discuss. I don't want to, God rest his soul, Bart Kohler. And it turned into we're supposed to have a discussion about the ETA and certification for sales reps. And I know this is something me and you have talked about a bunch of times about how there needs to be more control in this business over the people selling merchant services so that we can get the crooks out of this business and people be certified and there's a match list for bad people
Right.
selling stuff. I mean, listen, we get the same information as an insurance agent, a realtor, a banker, and they have to get licensed, but we're not licensed. But yeah, I had a podcast and that happened to me twice, and the person just didn't want to. They wanted they can't. The premise was they were going to talk about a particular subject, and then they turned it into a commercial about something else, and then I just let them know after it was done, like that's never going to get aired. So not airing the podcast.
Okay, so I'd like to put you on the spot for the predictions. You've told me, no one's ever come on and said something that you said was totally wrong. So let's see if that's at episode 500 if that's you. So uh, we'll replay this at the highlight reel of 500. So uh, where are stablecoins going to be in B2B payments by 100 episodes? Real infrastructure or still something that people talk about at conferences?
I think that we're going to see some really unique solutions for stablecoin where maybe you're going to have a credit card and it's going to have your credit card your be able to run a credit card on it and also move stablecoin. You're not going to get out a wallet and start scanning QR codes. That's just not, it takes too long and businesses are not going to put up with somebody. That's like at the grocery store, the lady who's got a check and they're writing a check and then they got to call the manager over to verify the check for one person. That's just, it's got to get on plastic. And before it's going to work, the IRS has to make a rule on how stablecoin is going to be tracked and reported. And then it will start to work. Because once that's done, it's just a dollar and they're just moving it a lot faster than sending a wire or sending a Swift, right? Someone would be able to literally like use a card with a number on it and send it across the network.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're putting you on the spot here because the recent legislature is, look, we're not touching this anytime soon. They said publicly, don't worry, FedNow is not coming. So you're saying by episode 500, I'm gonna go tap my phone instead of my Chase card, it's gonna come out of my stable coin
No,
wallet.
you have the option to possibly do that.
It won't be mandated by then.
No, it's not going to be mandated. I think you'll have the option to do that. And maybe it's going to start with, moving B2B payments, like with stablecoin. I mean, it's already happening in the EU. It's got to happen here, but there's got to be an IRS rule change. If the IRS doesn't make a rule change on stablecoin, then it's just going to be too much paperwork and nobody's going to want to do it.
Okay. AI agents, it's a hot topic right now. It's really disrupting, my clientels, the ISOs, the banks, the processors. Um, Prediction. Is agentic commerce going to be real in, was it 2 years for 500 episodes?
2 years. It could be. That's a coin flip right there because it's going to depend on how successful it is. I mean, you already have some agentic stuff going on now. Like I can go on OpenAI. Let's say I'm going to shop for headphones. I always give that example. And you say, I need some noise canceling headphones that are good on an airplane so I don't hear babies crying and noise. And then it'll give you all bunch of results, pictures, prices, everything. And then you might say, well, I want to wait for them to go on sale. And then it'll email you when they go on sale. And I've tested that out. I mean, I think we're going to see a rise in, if there's going to be agentic commerce, there's going to be a big change in the credit card industry that's going to be really disruptive because instead of having a plastic card, I think people will start to revert to using a lot of virtual cards so they could control those purchases and not go over the dollar
Right.
amounts that you
I
want
was
to
just
spend.
I was just using my AI and because I've allowed the access, and mine's closed, so it's not out there, but it was going, I asked it, I was like, what does this mean? A client emailed me this. What does he mean here? And he's like, oh, here, I'm just going to hop in your Outlook and get some context. And I was like, oh, what? No, hold on. Set the approvals, but the same thing with shopping, because I've done the same thing of, hey, I want these three things. Find me the lowest price that ships here. Take me to the checkout page, but and then I said, don't check me out. And it'll go there. And a couple times it went to like burner sites and everything, and you correct it. But So are you saying this is going to exist in 2 years? You
It
got to
might.
pick one. I don't want to hear coin flip.
Coin
You're on.
flip. I think we're going to see some level of agentic commerce going
Mhm.
on where you'll be able to. It's going to cause a big problem because the bigger companies are going to be able to do it, and the small businesses might get hurt by it because
Yeah.
it's going to now you're not going to be sitting on a Google page searching for something. You're going to tell AI to go find it, and it's just going to go find the lowest price.
Well, you wouldn't make a hard prediction, so maybe you'll be running for office by then because I've spoken like a true
Definitely not.
politician.
I don't
Okay,
want to
so
be a politician.
so you've had guests. This is one I think you were on ours or I was on yours talking about the machines fighting the machines. So AI generated synthetic merchants that are making near perfect forged documents. Who wins the fraud arms race? The fraudsters with the AI or the underwriters with the AI catching the AI?
I think underwriting, some companies have to take a serious look at their underwriting and put some more humans on the underwriting because a lot of companies do not ask for documents anymore. You process an application, it asks the person 5 questions or 3 questions, then they're doing a plaid to hook up their bank account. And I think, and so you're not getting a voided check. We take the extra step when somebody said, we ask, you have processing statements? Yes or no? Yes, send them over. No, send us some bank statements. And then you got to check them because if you're not checking that, but I've seen merchants like get past underwriting with fake leases, fake bank statements. I mean, there's some people, there's some scammers. I can guarantee you where I've seen talk to merchants who are getting yelled at by credit card processors. Well, you blew up a merchant account and there's $50,000 of chargebacks right now, and you're going to pay them, and the person's like, I didn't do that. Well, we mailed the clovers to your business, and it's horrible what's going on with that right now. I mean, one of the things that I wish would change in our business is that as ISOs, we're required by the banks to do all this underwriting, right? But meanwhile, and you deal with this all the time, is you have merchants, they're selling whatever it is. It doesn't matter what they're selling. They're selling whatever, nutraceutical, or they're selling adult toys, or whatever it is they're selling. And they go sign up on PayPal, or they're selling a gun. And they sign up on PayPal, and they sign up on Stripe or QuickBooks or one host, whatever these companies, any of these, flat rate companies, 80 in checkout, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, where you're not answering a lot of questions. And then all of a sudden, boom, they're on the match list. Well, they process the transactions for 4 years, 5 years, and all of a sudden, their feet need to be held to the fire, just like our feet are being held to the fire. It's just, when I hear Congress having hearings, especially my friend that I hate, Dick Durbin, and they're sitting there beating up Visa, MasterCard. Do you know there's $1 billion in debt in this country, or whatever the number is, right? And the Visa and MasterCard go, yeah, talk to the banks. We're not in
Right.
charge of that. And at the same time, and then they're talking about rates, but why aren't they talking to PayPal, Square, and Stripe? How come you're not passing the Durbin savings that he created, right? They're not passing that on to the customer, to their
No.
customers. And it's, there's just big companies just get away with murder in our business.
They do it. That's an intro to my next question. So surcharging, dual pricing, junk fee regulation, lawsuits. Where does this land in 2 years? Is the regulation going to come out and catch up? Or is the market going to be forced to sort itself out first? Who wins?
Well, if it was up to me, I think that Visa and MasterCard have been really just lame with the whole thing with credit with surcharging, dual pricing, and all that, and the fines, and it's very spotty. You hear stories about people getting fined, but it's so few people. I mean, there's millions of businesses, so they can't control all of that. And I think it's a big issue, and I think it needs to be resolved because I think that if Visa and MasterCard don't resolve it, and they start and the other thing is I don't like some of the stuff going on now where the states all have different rules about stuff.
Oh yeah.
That's getting way too confusing for business owners. You know, we have one thing going on now where the penny's going away, and all of a sudden there's 19 states with different rules
Right.
on how to do rounding. But all this surcharging thing needs to come to a head. The one thing is that you just put the law of the rules of you know commerce in place, and okay, you go to a dry cleaner and they're charging you a fee to charge your credit card. Then there's another dry cleaner down the street, or this could be two restaurants, and they don't charge a fee. Well, it's up
Yeah.
to you. Do you like this place or that place? And let the public decide, what's what, and that's it. I mean, because the problem is you can't say, okay, it's okay for education to charge a fee and the government can charge a fee, but your private business, you can't charge fees to them.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense to me. I think the whole thing just needs to just be said, listen, let the public sort it out. If the public doesn't like it, then they won't go to those businesses. And that's it. And the Visa and MasterCard, you want to know what they need to spend their time on? They need to spend their time on fixing friendly fraud, because we have friendly fraud is completely out of control in the United States. It's a multi-billion-dollar problem. The banks are not losing any money. The
Yep.
merchants are the one, business owners are losing their shirts. I
Yep.
mean, it's a shame when I see a restaurant calling me on the phone, a restaurant or a bar that I have, and they're like, hey, someone's doing an $800 chargeback, and the card was present. And then we get a thing back and it says, oh, the terminal wasn't enabled with a PIN. What are you talking about? How it's a POS system? There's no PIN
Right.
pad.
Yeah.
Where's the PIN come in? If it required a PIN, why didn't the issuer decline the card? I mean, we're seeing tons of that going on. We're
Right.
seeing all these chargebacks going on. They need to have like 2FA on like every transaction. Like, oh, if your transaction is in a store where you don't go all the time, maybe they got to send you a text message and you have to okay the text message. Something like that. We can't keep this, the amount of fraud going on has to stop. And Visa and MasterCard, Amex, Discover need to put their foot down and stop this, because that's maybe people will say, because consumers love plastic because of the rewards, the miles, the cash back. So that's never going to go away. But the security has to get stepped up. And the merchants you can't just put it all on the merchants. Oh, you need more
Right.
fraud controls, more fraud controls,
Yep.
more fraud controls. What do you mean? There are no more fraud
Yeah,
controls.
there's no more. I mean, we had a client who's, taking the owner down to the bank with an ID and it was still not them. But okay, so if a business owner listens to one episode out of your next 100 episode, what is the topic that you already know it's going to be that episode?
It's going to be that episode. They're probably listening to something about either chargebacks or about some kind of technology that we're going to be talking about on the show. Because I think if you start looking at a year from now, 2 years from now, we're going to see more and more businesses using software to process transactions and less of these little machines out there.
All right,
The third,
Alan, last section. This could be the most challenging one for you yet. We're going rapid fire. You've got to answer it in one sentence or less. And as a professional writer, I will know where a period is supposed to go. So, what is the best business book that you've recommended on the show?
Who moved the cheese?
All right. One tool that you cannot run NPS without.
Calendly. my schedule
Aha.
calendar. That thing is so important.
That was more than one sentence.
Okay.
Cash discount or surcharge. Pick one and defend it in one sentence.
Cash discount, aka dual pricing. Let the consumers decide whether they like it or not.
That was 10 words. Perfect. A guest you haven't landed yet, but you want to be in the next 100.
Someone from Visa to talk about chargebacks.
Good luck. Chef knife or card reader, which one could you still use blindfolded? That's assuming that you could ever use either blindfolded.
Oh, chef knife for sure. I'm a master at chopping up stuff.
Okay, well, episode 500. Who hosts it?
Oh, we gotta have James Huber back.
There we go. All right, well, Alan, I appreciate you turning the power over to me. It's been a very, I'm full of power now. I can go, tackle anything, but now I have to pass the baton back to you.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for James to host this episode, and really appreciate that. And it was fun.
It was a good time. Thank you so much. What's coming up next to the next stretch of episodes?
We've got some interesting stuff that we're going to be talking about, Agentic AI, some tools that are available, and some other AI tools about for hiring people, running HR. We got quite a few episodes planned coming up to talk about, and some episodes we're going to try to get somebody to come on and talk about, like a fractional CFO and talk about cash flow. And,
Great.
AI I get hit up for a lot of people with AI all the time. So you can only do so many AI episodes. So, and we'll probably have global legal law come on soon and talk about some legal stuff,
There you go.
because it's important for business owners, I always say, in your business, do you have to lawyer up? And you know what I say? Yes, you can't depend on lawyer GPT. You have to get a lawyer, and you need to read agreements, leases, whatever agreements you have. It's super, super important. So, and we've discussed it before on the podcast, and it's very important that people do that, because people say your biggest investment's your house. Your next investment is your business.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the things that we've seen with merchants in payments. They haven't talked to a lawyer before doing this. And, we talked about in the beginning in, 2000, if you had a lawyer look at this thing, this lease that you signed, he would have gone, "What are you doing? Don't sign this lease. You're locked into this for longer than your business is," like you said. And nowadays it's the same thing when people are buying this technology. Do you realize that they've handcuffed you to this technology now and you can't leave because they own all of your recurring payments and everything like that. So it always pains us when we come in late and we're going, "Well, you're in this draconian contract, but you could have negotiated this."
Oh yeah, same thing with point of sale systems. Businesses don't realize all of a sudden they rip one out, and then the first company comes back and goes, "Hey, you're in the middle of a 5-year contract." So, merchants definitely need to realize and read what they're signing.
All right. Well, Alan, we're going to just go right into our next podcast almost here, but I'll turn it back to you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, peace out, everybody. I always say carpe diem, seize the day. And thank you again to James from Global Legal Law for interviewing me on today's podcast. Peace out,
right.
everybody.